one. Where is that from? This is Shakespeare from Macbeth. So the three witches are saying words, they are predicting what is to come in the story. So that was my story of the three witches I told you. I'm going to go over systematically the story, how this developed, how we learned about global warming in the first place. And I'll mention turning points in history, starting from the 19th century, early 19th century. This is really a 200 years old story. How we learned about it, and I'll give you landmarks where we had a better and better understanding over time. And this all happens through a method which is called scientific method. Scientific method is basically someone comes up with an idea, he tests it, he has the data, he publishes it. Many other scientists will challenge it. They say, okay, this all sounds good, but what about this? How do you know that it's not carbon dioxide, it's water vapor? How do you know? Did you show that it's not due to natural causes? Do you know that it's not due to the sun's flare or there's hot spots? How do you know this and how do you know that? So that is, all of that is part of the scientific method. Science is not someone like writes a paper and you accept it. That will be very silly. That is actually very antagonistic to the way science works. Right now, IPCC, which is Intergovernmental Panel on the Climate Change, they come up with update every 2 years. And when they come up with update, there are about hundreds of scientists from different disciplines that are related to global warming, whether it's meteorology, whether it's climate science, whether it's atmospheric science, or oceanography, or people who study volcanoes, people who study forests, people who study icebergs. So they are from different disciplines, people who are chemists, physicists, they're experts in carbon dioxide, in water vapor. That's all they did, wrote a dissertation, PhD, just in water vapor. So these are hundreds of different scientists from all over the world. They get consulted, their papers, their publications are reviewed, and then there's second tier of scientists. There are 200 or 300 experts in certain fields from all over the world. They review their work. First, a report is written based on opinions of hundreds of scientists, and then it gets reviewed again by several hundred experts, and they criticize. And they say, well, we are not sure, this needs to be taken out. This we know for sure, but this is still questionable. So after a lot of critique, finally they come up with the report, which is presented to the United Nations every 2 years. I think the fourth report came out in 2007. The fifth report might have come out recently, I'm not sure. They've been consistent what they have been saying. It was for the first time in 1995 when IPCC first time said, after deliberations over many years, that we know that there is a problem. And then in 1997 when they wrote the report, they said, well, actually, there is a problem, but now we also know that it's anthropogenic. In other words, it's caused by mankind. So let's go over this story, and that will tell you what really happened, how we came to believe. By the way, the statistics are changing. There is a recent poll that says that now about 72% of the Americans believe that global warming is a real issue. But the same poll also shows that about more than 50% of the Americans think that scientists are still debating. That's the funny part. Why do they believe that? Because when you are told something repeatedly over and over again, I can tell you, don't feel bad, even people who are well versed, who understand science, they can be confused too, because there are so many variables. There are so many things, they can throw some fact at you and create a doubt. That's the technique that we use. If you're going to misguide people, we're going to find ways to create doubt, uncertainty. So I'm going to go over a short story. I forgot to bring my glasses, but I think I can manage. This story goes back to a physicist, John Tyndall, he was born in 1820 and died in 1893. This was the first person ever, if you go back and see how far back this story goes. Who talked about it first time? It really goes back to John Tyndall. And he's the first person who said that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. He did not say anything about global warming. He didn't know anything about global warming. He had nothing to do with global warming. Scientists do their usual research in their own fields, and he was working on carbon dioxide, and he said this is a greenhouse gas. It causes, in other words, it causes rise in temperature. The word greenhouse comes from the greenhouses that you know. And then the next landmark is when Svante Arrhenius, this is a chemist who lived in Sweden in the early 20th century. He was studying a particular branch of chemistry which is called chemical thermodynamics. Thermodynamics refers to studying heat, the effect of heat. He stated that in a research paper, that if you double carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it can raise approximately between 1.5 degree to 4.5 degrees Celsius temperature. Again, these are the very first ideas. He lived in Sweden. He said it's a good thing. That tells you why. If you ever been to Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Norway, you know what he's talking about. Try going there in June. All of a sudden the sun is up and then the wind hits you. You cannot even expose your nose because it will freeze. It will become ice. That's how cold it is. And generally speaking, believe it or not, global warming, temperatures staying up on the planet, they are a good thing. Why do we say that? Let's understand a little bit. In the last ice ages and global warmings, they shift between ice ages usually last by 100 to 150,000 years. And then it follows by global warming periods of 20 to 30,000. Approximately, that's what the history shows, the last 2 million years. Those millions of years don't exist for you if you believe God said, let there be light 6,004 years ago and the earth was created, then that doesn't apply. But I'm talking about science. So for the last 20,000 years, the earth has been warming. That is what allowed our species to evolve. There will be no life on earth. And this is a cyclical phenomenon. Every 100,000 years, then 20,000 years of global warming that goes into ice age again. Actually, this is one of their arguments of the critics. How do you know it's not one of those regular cycles and, it's a cyclical phenomenon. That's one of the criticisms. But that's a very dumb argument because it's been studied long time ago. And we know what we are talking about here is nothing to do with the cyclical phenomenon. So what I'm trying to say is that global warming is a good thing in general, because if there was no global warming, we wouldn't be here. Actually, we will be like Mars or Moon, and the temperature during the day will be minus 300 degree temperature. And there will be no life here. So generally speaking, it's a good thing. So he was right, it's a good thing. The Swedish scientist. So then we move on, and in 1930 there was a British engineer. He's really the first one who gets the credit for kind of start thinking about that this could be a problem. His name is Guy Callender. He was the first one to establish that carbon dioxide is actually rising a little bit in the atmosphere, that it may raise the planet's temperature and it may not be such a good thing for us. He was the first one who commented. So he gets the credit of first time bringing up an issue. But still we are pretty ignorant at this stage about the global warming issue. About the same time, there was Dr. Hulbert. He published a paper in Physical Review, a science journal, and he said that in the previous 50 years, between 1880 and 1930, there has been a slight temperature increase. And he also estimated that if you double the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it can raise a temperature up to 4 degrees of Celsius, which also translates into Kelvin scale of 7 degrees. Kelvin scale is a scientific scale of temperature. And then, as you know, after 1930s comes the Great Depression, and it becomes a non-issue. Great Depression went away when the World War came. So like 30, 40 years until the World War was over, there was so much going on that we couldn't care less about global warming. Or first of all, very little was known about it. It wasn't that important. But if it was in any sense, it will be an issue that a scientist deal with, you know. They're doing their research. It's not really a public issue of public concern. So there is a kind of a gap. But it's relevant. There is a gap, but it's relevant. Depression is somewhat relevant, but World War II is very relevant, this whole issue. How is that? World wars were over. America was the greatest country in the whole world at that time, the richest. We thrived the most at that time. The economy was the best ever after World War II. And soon after World War, Russia is rising now. Their technology, they sent Sputnik to a moon before we did, and a panic button set in that Russia is already in space, that we need to compete and we need to defeat communism. A little bit paranoia set in, and there are some people, they ignite the fire. Then we come to, the story is continuous. There is really no breaks. It's an ongoing story. In 1983, if you recall, Ronald Reagan had established the so-called SDI, which stands for Strategic Defense Initiative, which was kind of a Star Wars ideas that we're going to build lasers, then shooting the planets. I mean, it's really from science fiction. So almost nearly every scientist, every physicist, anybody who deals with this kind of thing or understands weaponry said, you know what, this is kind of unrealistic. Nobody says that we will be able to achieve that technology maybe 100 years down the line. It will happen. That's the reality of life. Technology is going up like this. Another 50 years, we might have those things. But at that time, not only we didn't have any possibility of developing such technology, but also we didn't even have any feasibility studies. The scientists were saying that it will take 10 years just to study to see if it is even possible, let alone doing it. It will take 10 years to see if this kind of science is even possible. So this is all fantasy, let's drop it. All scientists were against it. 6,500 scientists in the United States signed against it. Actually, they said, we are not going to take any funds or grants from SDI program. And there were only a couple of scientists which worked with the government. I'm talking about reputable scientists. Scientists who had names, who had done great work. There were only a couple of reputable scientists that were had high connections in the government. They were against it. And they were against it primarily for political reasons. Because the fear was that it's going to defeat the whole purpose. We are trying to save democracy, and we are trying to save capitalism here, and we are trying to defeat communism. And this is, you know, it's going to bring about government regulations and all that. So that's where the war begins. But let me continue the story. I think it's self-revealing and it starts to make sense as I move forward. In 1957, there are two very reputable scientists, Suez and Ravel. They published